name's Laura Sullivan. Many of you might know me as Mrs. Sullivan. I'm a mommy, a teacher, and I rescue vintage buttons and findings to make wearable art.
I began my journey in art as a child. I've always enjoyed art in many forms. I find art to be an outlet. Although I have a full-time job, I teach, I still find time to do art. It's my hobby. It's something that I enjoy. It relaxes me, makes me happy. I find that, making wearable art out of upcycled materials, that whole part of my artistic endeavor started one day when I was shopping at a flea market. And I saw a jar full of old buttons. They were so colorful, and each one was so unique. It's as if they told a story. And I feel like that's when my journey with upcycling and salvaging old pieces and making them into wearable art began. I purchased that jar of buttons and among other things that day. And I knew that I had to find a way to make something out of them. So I started to make my pieces, my barrettes, and I felt that each one of the little buttons or little pieces of vintage findings that I used, it made their story come to life again. I remember bringing my jar of buttons home and emptying them out all over my table and looking at the different pieces and seeing which ones I loved. And that's when I started creating my buttonrettes. And I love creating those buttonrettes the most. Each one is unique. Each one of my buttonrettes, I feel, tells or retells a story based on the items that are adorned on them. They're basically little collages of unique findings. Being an artist changes how I see the world in many ways. For example, what others might see as useless junk, I see it as beautiful. And I look at it and think about a way that I can repurpose it. I have a way of relating unrelated objects. Faucet bibs, vintage jewelry, game pieces, buttons. I look at these items and I wonder how I can make them into art. My pieces have all sorts of items that are used in ways other than the ways they were intended to be used. And when you think about all the little pieces and parts of a buttonrette or a specific bag that I've created and adorned with vintage buttons and findings, you think about what goes into that in terms of supplies. So again, where others see something ready to be tossed in the trash, such as an old necklace, I see the little pieces and parts of it, and I envision how some, if not all, of it can be repurposed into something else. Artists face challenges while they're being creative. For me, I'm a very passionate and driven person, and everything I do, I give 100%. And if not 100%, 110%. So, when I'm being creative, sometimes I run into challenges, and I have different ways of coping with those challenges, and I have different ways of overcoming those challenges. One thing that I like to do is I step away for a little while to refresh myself, to balance my brain almost. And then I might return to a piece that I'm working on another day, or in a few hours, or, I might move on to something different. And I find that taking a little break helps me to clear my mind so that I could go back into a piece and successfully overcome the challenge that I was facing. As I mentioned before, I'm a mom with 3 kids. So I don't have a space dedicated specifically for art in my house, but I do work on my pieces in my house, usually the dining room, and the dining room table is great for this. I have a vintage 1920s dining room set from my grandmother, so it's fitting as many of my buttons and pieces I repurpose are vintage. I also like to sit on my deck when the weather is nice. I do store all my buttons in large jars and plastic bins. However, when I'm working, I have to admit I don't always put my things away. It could be a bit messy, and my work kind of takes over at times. However, even though it looks messy to people that might be just taking a glance at it, I know where everything is. And my family doesn't seem to mind. I guess what my message is that art can happen anywhere. You really don't have to have a space that's dedicated specifically to art. Art can come to be in any room, in any space. It's whatever works best for the artist.